Master Wordlist. Words starting with letter M. Machinations. Means evil schemes or plots. For example, fortunately, Batman saw through the wily machinations of the Riddler and saved Gotham City from destruction by the forces of evil. Madrigal. Means pastoral song. For example, his program of folk songs included several madrigals which he sang to the accompaniment of a lute. Maelstrom. Means whirlpool. For example, the canoe was tossed about in the maelstrom. Magnanimous. Means generous, great-hearted. For example, philanthropists by definition are magnanimous, misers, by definition, are not. Magnate. Means person of prominence or influence. For example, growing up in Pittsburgh, Annie Dillard was surrounded by the mansions of the great steel and coal magnates who set their mark on that city. Magnitude. Means greatness, extent. For example, it is difficult to comprehend the magnitude of his crime. Maim. Means mutilate, injure. For example, a hospital could not take care of all who had been wounded or maimed in the railroad accident. Maladroit. Means clumsy, bungling. For example, how maladroit it was of me to mention seeing you out partying last night. From the look on his face, I take it that your boyfriend thought you were otherwise occupied. Malady. Means illness. For example, a mysterious malady swept the country, filling doctors' offices with feverish, purple-spotted patients. Malaise. Means uneasiness. For example, feeling slightly queasy before going on stage, Carol realized that this touch of malaise was merely stage fright. Malapropism. Means comic misuse of a word. For example, when Mrs. Malaprop accuses Lydia of being as headstrong as an allegory on the banks of the Nile, she confuses allegory and alligator in a typical malapropism. Malcontent. Means person dissatisfied with existing state of affairs. For example, one of the few malcontents in Congress, he constantly voiced his objections to the presidential program. Malediction. Means curse. For example, when the magic mirror revealed that Snow White was still alive, the wicked queen cried out in rage and uttered dreadful maledictions. Malefactor. Means evildoer, criminal. For example, Mighty Mouse will save the day, hunting down malefactors and rescuing innocent mice from peril. Malevolent. Means wishing evil. For example, Lego is a malevolent villain who takes pleasure in ruining Othello. Malfeasance. Means wrongdoing. For example, the authorities did not discover the campaign manager's malfeasance until after he had spent most of the money he had embezzled. Malicious. Means hateful, spiteful. For example, jealous of Cinderella's beauty, her malicious stepsisters expressed their spite by forcing her to do menial tasks. Malign. Means speak evil of, badmouth, defame. For example, putting her hands over her ears, Rose refused to listen to Betty malign her friend Susan. Malignant. means injurious, tending to cause death. For example, though many tumors are benign, some are malignant, growing out of control and endangering the life of the patient. Malingerer means one who feigns illness to escape duty. For example, the captain ordered the sergeant to punish all malingerers and force them to work. Malleable means capable of being shaped by pounding. For example, gold is a malleable metal, easily shaped into bracelets and rings. Malodorous means foul-smelling. For example, the compost heap was most malodorous in summer. Mammal means a vertebrate animal whose female suckles its young. For example, many people regard the whale as a fish and do not realize that it is a mammal. Mammoth means gigantic, enormous. For example, to try to memorize every word on this vocabulary list would be a mammoth undertaking. Take on projects that are more manageable in size. Mandate means order, charge. For example, in his inaugural address, the president stated that he had a mandate from the people to seek an end to social evils such as poverty. Mandatory means obligatory. For example, these instructions are mandatory. Any violation will be severely punished. Maniacal means raging mad, insane. For example, though Mr. Rochester had locked his mad wife in the attic, he could still hear her maniacal laughter echoing throughout the house. Manifest means evident, visible, obvious. For example, Digby's embarrassment when he met Madonna was manifest. His ears turned bright pink, he kept scuffing one shoe in the dirt, and he couldn't look her in the eye. Manifesto means declaration, statement of policy. For example, the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels proclaimed the principles of modern communism. Manipulate means control or play upon artfully. For example, Madonna understands how to manipulate men and publicity. Manard means affected, not natural. For example, attempting to copy the style of his wealthy neighbors, Gatsby adopted a mannered, artificial way of speech. Marital means pertaining to marriage. For example, after the publication of his book on marital affairs, he was often consulted by married people on the verge of divorce. Maritime means bordering on the sea, nautical. For example, the maritime provinces depend on the sea for their wealth. Marked means noticeable or pronounced, targeted for vengeance. For example, as British ambassador, he knew he was a marked man, for he knew the Irish Republican Army wanted him dead. Marquee means canopy above an entrance. For example, on stormy days, the hotel doorman keeps dry by standing directly beneath the marquee. Marred means damaged, disfigured. For example, she had to refinish the marred surface of the table. Marshal means put in order. For example, at a debate tournament, extemporaneous speakers have only a minute or two to marshal their thoughts before they address their audience. Marsupial means one of a family of mammals that nurse their offspring in a pouch. For example, the most common marsupial in North America is the opossum. Marshal means warlike. For example, the sound of martial music inspired the young cadet with dreams of military glory. Martinet means strict disciplinarian. For example, no talking at meals, no mingling with the servants. Miss Minchin was a Martinet who insisted that the schoolgirls in her charge observe each regulation to the letter. Martyr means one who voluntarily suffers death for his or her religion. For example, by burning her at the stake, the English made Joan of Arc a martyr for her faith. Masochist means person who enjoys his own pain. For example, the masochist begs, "Hit me." The sadist smiles and says, "I won't." Material means made of physical matter, unspiritual. For example, probing the mysteries of this material world has always fascinated physicist George Whitesides. Materialism means preoccupation with physical comforts and things. For example, by its nature, materialism is opposed to idealism, for where the materialist emphasizes the needs of the body, the idealist emphasizes the needs of the soul. Maternal means motherly. For example, many animals display maternal instincts only while their offspring are young and helpless. Matriarch means woman who rules a family. For example, the matriarch ruled her gypsy tribe with a firm hand. Matriculate means enroll. For example, incoming students formally matriculate at our college in a special ceremony during which they sign the official register of students. Maudlin means effusively sentimental. For example, whenever a particularly maudlin tearjerker was playing at the movies, Marvin would embarrass himself by weeping copiously. Maul means handle roughly. For example, the rock star was mauled by his overexcited fans. Maverick means rebel, nonconformist. For example, to the masculine literary establishment, George Sand, with her insistence on wearing trousers and smoking cigars, was clearly a maverick who fought her proper womanly role. Mawkish means mushy and gushy. For example, whenever Gigi and her boyfriend would sigh and get all lovey-dovey, her little brother would shout, "Yuck," protesting their mawkish behavior. Maxim means a truth pithily stated. For example, Aesop's fables illustrate moral maxims. Meager means scanty, inadequate. For example, still hungry after his meager serving of porridge, Oliver Twist asked for a second helping. Meander means wind or turn in its course. For example, needing to stay close to a source of water, he followed every twist and turn of the stream as it meandered through the countryside. Meddlesome means interfering. For example, he felt his marriage was suffering because of his meddlesome mother-in-law. Mediate means settle a dispute through the services of an outsider. For example, King Solomon was asked to mediate a dispute between two women, each of whom claimed to be the mother of the same child. Mediocre means ordinary, commonplace. For example, we were disappointed because he gave a rather mediocre performance in this role. Meditation means reflection, thought. For example, she reached her decision only after much meditation. Medley means mixture. For example, to avoid boring dancers by playing any one tune for too long, bands may combine 3 or 4 tunes into a medley. Meek means quiet and obedient, spiritless. For example, can Lois Lane see through Superman's disguise and spot the superhero hiding behind the guise of meek, timorous Clark Kent? Melancholy means gloomy, morose. For example, to Eugene, stuck in his small town, a train whistle was a melancholy sound, for it made him think of all the places he would never get to see. Mellifluous means sweetly or smoothly flowing. For example, Italian is a mellifluous language, especially suited to being sung. Membrane means thin soft sheet of animal or vegetable tissue. For example, each individual section of an orange is covered with a thin, transparent membrane. Memento means token, reminder. For example, take this book as a memento of your visit. Menagerie means collection of wild animals. For example, whenever the children run wild around the house, Mom shouts, "Calm down. I'm not running a menagerie." Mendacious means lying, habitually dishonest. For example, distrusting Huck from the start, Miss Watson assumed he was mendacious and refused to believe a word he said. Mendicant means beggar. For example, "O noble sir, give alms to the poor," cried Aladdin, playing the mendicant. Menial means suitable for servants, lowly. For example, her wicked stepmother forced Cinderella to do menial tasks around the house while her ugly stepsisters lolled around painting their toenails. Mentor means teacher. For example, during this very trying period, she could not have had a better mentor, for the teacher was sympathetic and understanding. Mercenary means interested in money or gain. For example, Andy's every act was prompted by mercenary motives. His first question was always, "What's in it for me?" Mercurial means changing, fickle. For example, quick as quicksilver to change, he was mercurial in nature and therefore unreliable. Merger means combination of 2 business corporations. For example, when the firm's president married the director of financial planning, the office joke was that it wasn't a marriage, it was a merger. Mesmerize means hypnotize. For example, the incessant drone seemed to mesmerize him and place him in a trance. Metallurgical means pertaining to the art of removing metals from ores. For example, during the course of his metallurgical research, the scientist developed a steel alloy of tremendous strength. Metamorphosis means change of form, major transformation. For example, the metamorphosis of caterpillar to butterfly is typical of many such changes in animal life. Metaphor means implied comparison. For example, he soared like an eagle is an example of a simile, he is an eagle in flight, a metaphor. Metaphysical means pertaining to speculative philosophy. For example, the modern poets have gone back to the fanciful poems of the metaphysical poets of the 17th century for many of their images. Methodical means systematic. For example, an accountant must be methodical and maintain order among his financial records. Meticulous means excessively careful, painstaking. For example, Martha Stewart was a meticulous housekeeper, fussing about each and every detail that went into making up her perfect home. Metropolis means large city. For example, every evening the terminal is filled with thousands of commuters going from this metropolis to their homes in the suburbs. Metal means courage, spirit. For example, when challenged by the other horses in the race, the thoroughbred proved its mettle by its determination to hold the lead. Miasma means vaporous atmosphere. For example, the smog hung over Victorian London like a dark cloud, noisome, reeking of decay. It was a visible miasma. Microcosm means the world in miniature. For example, the small village community that Jane Austen depicts serves as a microcosm of English society in her time, for in this small world we see all the social classes meeting and mingling. Migrant means changing its habitat, wandering. For example, these migrant birds return every spring. Migratory means wandering. For example, the return of the migratory birds to the northern sections of this country is a harbinger of spring. Milieu means environment, means of expression. For example, surrounded by smooth preppies and arty bohemians, the country boy from small town, USA, felt out of his milieu. Militant means combative, bellicose. For example, although at this time he was advocating a policy of neutrality, one could usually find him adopting a more militant attitude. Mimicry means imitation. For example, her gift for mimicry was so great that her friends said that she should be in the theater. Mincing means affectedly dainty. For example, Yum Yum walked across the stage with mincing steps. Minuscule means extremely small. For example, why should I involve myself with a project with so minuscule a chance for success? Minute means extremely small. For example, the twins resembled one another closely, only minute differences set them apart. Minutiae means petty details. For example, she would have liked to ignore the minutiae of daily living. Mirage means unreal reflection, optical illusion. For example, the lost prospector was fooled by a mirage in the desert. Mire means entangle, stick in swampy ground. For example, their rear wheels became mired in mud. Mirth means merriment, laughter. For example, sober Malvolio found Sir Toby's mirth improper. Misanthrope means one who hates mankind. For example, in Gulliver's Travels, Swift portrays an image of humanity as vile, degraded beasts. For this reason, various critics consider him a misanthrope. Misapprehension means error, misunderstanding. For example, to avoid misapprehension, I am going to ask all of you to repeat the instructions I have given. Miscellany means mixture of writings on various subjects. For example, this is an interesting miscellany of 19th century prose and poetry. Mischance means ill luck. For example, by mischance, he lost his week's salary. Misconception means mistaken idea. For example, sir, you are suffering from a misconception. Misconstrue means interpret incorrectly, misjudge. For example, she took the passage seriously rather than humorously because she misconstrued the author's ironic tone. Misdemeanor means minor crime. For example, the culprit pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor rather than face trial for a felony. Miserly means stingy, mean. For example, transformed by his vision on Christmas Eve, mean old Scrooge ceased being miserly and became a generous, kind old man. Misgivings means doubts. For example, Hamlet described his misgivings to Horatio but decided to fence with Laertes despite his foreboding of evil. Mishap means accident. For example, with a little care you could have avoided this mishap. Misnomer means wrong name, incorrect designation. For example, his tyrannical conduct proved to all that his nickname, King Eric the Just, was a misnomer. Misrepresent means give a false or incorrect impression. For example, in his job application, Milton misrepresented his academic background. He was fired when his employers discovered the truth. Missile means object to be thrown or projected. For example, after carefully folding his book report into a paper airplane, Beavis threw the missile across the classroom at butt head. Missive means letter. For example, the ambassador received a missive from the Secretary of State. Mite means very small object or creature. For example, gnats are annoying mites that sting. Mitigate means appease, moderate. For example, nothing Jason did could mitigate Medea's anger. She refused to forgive him for betraying her. Mnemonic means pertaining to memory. For example, he used mnemonic tricks to master new words. Mobile means movable, not fixed. For example, the mobile blood bank operated by the Red Cross visited our neighborhood today. Mock means ridicule, imitate. For example, it is unkind to mock anyone. It is stupid to mock anyone significantly bigger than you. Mode means prevailing style, manner. For example, The rock star had to have her hair done in the latest mode, frizzed, with occasional moussed spikes for variety. Modicum means limited quantity. For example, although his story is based on a modicum of truth, most of the events he describes are fictitious. Modulate means tone down in intensity, regulate. For example, always singing at the top of her lungs, the budding Brunhild never learned to modulate her voice. Molecule means the smallest particle of a substance. For example, in chemistry, we study how atoms and molecules react to form new substances. Mollify means soothe. For example, the airline customer service representative tried to mollify the angry passenger by offering her a seat in first class. Molt means shed or cast off hair or feathers. For example, when Molly's canary molted, he shed feathers all over the house. Molten means melted. For example, the city of Pompeii was destroyed by volcanic ash rather than by molten lava flowing from Mount Vesuvius. Momentous means very important. For example, when Marie and Pierre Curie discovered radium, they had no idea of the momentous impact their discovery would have upon society. Momentum means quantity of motion of a moving body. For example, the car lost momentum as it tried to ascend the steep hill. Monarchy means government under a single ruler. For example, though England today is a monarchy, there is some question whether it will be one in 20 years, given the present discontent at the prospect of Prince Charles as king. Monastic means related to monks or monasteries. For example, withdrawing from the world, Thomas Merton joined a contemplative religious order and adopted the monastic life. Monetary means pertaining to money. For example, Jane held the family purse strings. She made all monetary decisions affecting the household. Monochromatic means having only one color. For example, most people who are colorblind actually can distinguish several colors. Some, however, have a truly monochromatic view of a world all in shades of gray. Monolithic means solidly uniform, unyielding. For example, knowing the importance of appearing resolute, the Patriots sought to present a monolithic front. Monosyllabic means having only one syllable. For example, no matter what he was asked, the taciturn New Englander answered with a monosyllabic yep or nope. Monotony means sameness leading to boredom. For example, what could be more deadly dull than the monotony of punching numbers into a computer hour after hour? Montage means photographic composition combining elements from different sources. For example, in one early montage, Beecham brought together pictures of broken mannequins and newspaper clippings about the Vietnam War. Monumental means massive. For example, writing a dictionary is a monumental task. Moodiness means fits of depression or gloom. For example, her recurrent moodiness left her feeling as if she had fallen into a black hole. Moratorium means legal delay of payment. For example, if we declare a moratorium and delay collection of debts for 6 months, I am sure the farmers will be able to meet their bills. Morbid means given to unwholesome thought. For example, people who come to disaster sites just to peer at the grisly wreckage are indulging their morbid curiosity. Mores means conventions, moral standards. For example, in America, Benazir Bhutto dressed as Western women did. In Pakistan, however, she followed the mores of her people, dressing in traditional veil and robes. Moribund means dying. For example, Hearst took a moribund, failing weekly newspaper and transformed it into one of the liveliest, most profitable daily papers around. Morose means ill-humored. For example, forced to take early retirement, Bill acted morose for months, then, all of a sudden, he shook off his sullen mood and was his usual cheerful self. Mortician means undertaker. For example, the mortician prepared the corpse for burial. Mortify means humiliate. For example, she was so mortified by her blunder that she ran to her room in tears. Mosaic means picture made of colorful small tiles. For example, the mayor compared the city to a beautiful mosaic made up of people of every race and religion on earth. Mote means small speck. For example, the tiniest mote in the eye is very painful. Motif means theme. For example, this simple motif runs throughout the entire score. Motley means multicolored. For example, the jester wore a motley tunic, red and green and blue and gold, all patched together haphazardly. Mottled means blotched in coloring. For example, when old Falstaff blushed, his face was mottled with embarrassment, all pink and purple and red. Muddle means confuse, mix up. For example, his thoughts were muddled and chaotic. Muggy means warm and damp. For example, August in New York City is often muggy. Multifaceted means having many aspects. For example, a multifaceted composer, Roger Davidson, has recorded original pieces that range from ragtime tangos to choral masses. Multifarious means varied, greatly diversified. For example, a career woman and mother, she was constantly busy with the multifarious activities of her daily life. Multiform means having many forms. For example, snowflakes are multiform but always hexagonal. Multilingual means having many languages. For example, because they are bordered by so many countries, the Swiss people are multilingual. Multiplicity means state of being numerous. For example, he was appalled by the multiplicity of details he had to complete before setting out on his mission. Mundane means worldly as opposed to spiritual. For example, uninterested in philosophical or spiritual discussions, Tom talked only of mundane matters such as the daily weather forecast or the latest basketball results. Munificent means very generous. For example, shamelessly fawning over a particularly generous donor, the dean kept on referring to her as our munificent benefactor. Mural means wall painting. For example, the walls of the Chicano Community Center are covered with murals painted in the style of Diego Rivera, the great Mexican artist. Murky means dark and gloomy, thick with fog. For example, the murky depths of the swamp were so dark that one couldn't tell the vines and branches from the snakes. Muse means ponder. For example, for a moment he mused about the beauty of the scene, but his thoughts soon changed as he recalled his own personal problems. Mushroom means expand or grow rapidly. For example, between 1990 and 1999, the population of Silicon Valley mushroomed. With the rapidly increasing demand for housing, home prices skyrocketed as well. Musky means having the odor of musk. For example, she left a trace of musky perfume behind her. Muster means gather, assemble. For example, Washington mustered his forces at Trenton. Musty means stale, spoiled by age. For example, the attic was dark and musty. Mutability means ability to change in form, fickleness. For example, going from rags to riches, and then back to rags again, the bankrupt financier was a victim of the mutability of fortune. Muted means silent, muffled, toned down. For example, thanks to the thick, sound-absorbing walls of the cathedral, only muted traffic noise reached the worshippers within. Mutinous means unruly, rebellious. For example, the captain had to use force to quiet his mutinous crew. Myopic means nearsighted, lacking foresight. For example, stumbling into doors despite the Coke bottle lenses on his glasses, the nearsighted Mr. Magoo is markedly myopic. Myriad means very large number. For example, myriads of mosquitoes from the swamps invaded our village every twilight. Mystify means bewilder purposely. For example, when doctors speak in medical jargon, they often mystify their patients, who have little knowledge of medical terminology. End of the word list with words starting with letter M.